Bonnie had a question whether the word time could be edited out and replaced with the actual time. I told her no, it couldn't, and then I glibly said, but you could build your own. So I better make sure that they actually can do that. Okay, I've placed the two split screens side by side. This is the original from Filmora, and this is the copy that I built, the lookalike copy that I built from scratch. And when we play them, they look fairly close. Let's give it a shot. It's just 5 seconds. Okay, we see that basically the same concepts here. We have the basic rectangle shapes floating in. Then we have the start of the screens appearing. And there they are. And then finally we start getting the widgets to come in. These are the widgets. Widgets here, here, here. And the favorite icon comes up. Okay, let's start by setting up the work surface the way we need it. Let's turn off the magnetic timeline. Project over here doesn't say 25 frames per second. Go into the project settings and adjust the speed right here. This will help you when I give you timestamps of where to place the playhead. And the next thing we need is to add the template that we're going to copy. So go to Templates, click on Split Screen, and click on Social Media, and find this one, which is called Split Screen number 16, and drop that down on timeline on the track. Next thing we want to do is we want to expand it to the full 5 seconds. So use the zoom to fit on the timeline so we can see it here. And the next thing we want to do then is just move it up one track, because we're going to drop the background color down onto track number 1. And we can find that over in stock media. And if we go to the library, we can go down to gradient colors, and we can scroll down until we get to gradient 16, I believe is the one that I'm using. No, I'm sorry, 11. And then just go ahead and drag that down to track number 1. Okay, we're going to create 6 basic shapes. So click the track header above track 2 so that it's selected. And then move the playhead to 3:15, timestamp 3:15 frame. That way we have all the 3 basic shapes on the screen. And they're really made up of 2 things. There's the phone, the outer case, and then there is the phone screen, which is the colored portion of each one of these. So we're going to need 6 rectangles. Select the basic drawing tool. If you don't have this drawing tool on there, you can find it in the menu, and you can drag it up and click Save. But it's basically this icon here, and then you just select the rectangle. And just draw a rectangle in here. Okay, let's give this rectangle some of our basic criteria. And one is we've got rounded corners, so let's go here and set that value to 11%. And we can just type it in. The next thing we need to do is let's change the fill opacity to 40% so we can see the underlying shape. And 40% is whatever you can, I say 40%, whatever makes you comfortable where you can see the image down below. That's the main thing. And then let's scroll down and change the border thickness to 3. Next, we're going to try to change the shape, or I'm sorry, we are going to change the shape so that it matches this outline border here. And to do that, let's scroll all the way up to the transform section, and I will give you the numbers that you can punch in. They should match for the scale. First of all, make sure that the lock is unlocked, and then set the scale for the X at 28.88 and set the Y value to 84.55. like so. And that should be a fairly close fit. And then we need to change the position of X and Y also. So let's set X to minus 624.25 and the Y value to minus 5.62. And so now we should be pretty close to matching what we have here. So, but if they don't match, you can manually adjust by dragging each of the handles here so you get close. So if your values don't match mine. Next, we need 5 more copies of this. So let's right-click on it, do copy, and because we've selected this top track here, it's going to paste right on top. So just do either right-click and paste, or just Control-V 5 times. Paste 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Next, move your playhead all the way back to the beginning of the timeline. We want to delete all the blank spaces in front of our rectangles, so select them one at a time, click delete, and if you don't see the little X, just hit the delete key. All right, so then they all line up, and then reposition the playhead at 315. Select the 3 top rectangles, and let's change the, first of all, let's turn off the fill. And then let's change the border to red. So this is going to be the viewport or the basic color in here. We want to shrink down the size a little bit. So let's scroll up to transform and change the scale to 28 and 83. 28 and 83. And that should pretty much match this. It should be a little bit bigger because we're going to be adding a mask later on. Let's move the shapes from here into here and here. So select number 2 and number 5. Hold down the Control key and then type in a negative value of 2.25. And that moves our number 2 over there. Now select number 3 and number 6 and type in a value of 613. That's positive. And now we've moved all of our shapes into the place where we want them to be. Okay, let's just scrub across the timeline and see what is happening. Here's our basic shapes. And we can see that the underlying shapes, the phone, shall we call it, fly in from the left. And we can see that the screens basically grow from the center of the phone and become large. And so we're going to match this animation or movement with the use of keyframes. The other thing we can see or we can observe is that the phone shapes are fuzzy as they move across the screen. This gives the effect of a motion blur. For the time being, we're not going to be working with the phone screens, so let's turn them off. All we have to do is click the little eyeball here, and we won't be seeing those for the time being. So that's fine. Now, we talked about this motion blur, and we can't add motion blur to the shapes themselves. We can keyframe the location, but we can't add the motion blur. So what we need to do is we need to convert these rectangles into compound clips. And we're going to do that like this. We're going to right-click on one, and we're going to call it phone 1. And then we're going to say OK, and we're going to repeat that process for number 2 and number 3. Start by selecting all 3 of our compound clips, the phones, and then move our playhead over to 315. And here we can set a basic location. So we will click the transform icon, the keyframe icon, and set a keyframe on all 3 of them. Phone number 3 is going to arrive at its final position first, and that happens on the 24th frame. So click over here and reset it for 24th frame, and you should see a completed phone number 3. So selecting only number 3, click the keyframe icon over here and transform. And we will set the locations for number 2, which comes to rest at keyframe number 106. And so we will have just the second one selected, and we will keyframe that. And then finally, the last one comes to rest at keyframe number 109. And so we will select number 1, and we will add a keyframe there. Next, we want to move all the shapes off the screen to the left. So let's start by moving our playhead to the beginning of the timeline. And let's select all 3 of them. And let's make sure we don't lose our location here. We want to be able to see everything. And using the X position, we will now move them across until they are completely off the screen, right about there. And you will see that added a starting keyframe for all of them. But I prefer to have really all the attributes. We only got a keyframe on the X position. I prefer to have them on all of them. It's not really necessary, but it is worthwhile. Let's verify the movement of our shapes. And we can quickly see that they don't move at the same speed. We're moving at a constant speed from point A to point B, whereas the template shape is moving at a variable speed. Now we can fix this movement in one of 2 ways. We can either use a number of keyframes on the timeline, or we can add a curved movement, pretty much like the path curve that's mentioned here, on the each of the individual shapes to match that. Now that's called a Bezier curve, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on it because for most of you it's going to be too difficult to manage. But for those of you who do like to use the Bezier curve to alter the speed of something, I'll just show you how the graph editor is called up and how you can assign shapes or curve types to them. By clicking this icon right here, we can open up the graph editor, and we can see that it comes up with scale. Now make sure this is unchecked. If you activated this over here, this will become checked. We don't want this to be checked. So let's turn it off over here, because we cannot select what we want to change. And all we really want to change is the X position. So let's click that. Now by clicking or selecting the X position, we have our starting keyframe, we have where it reaches its final destination, and then there was the keyframe here at 3:15. So this is a linear movement. In other words, just goes from one to the next at the same speed. If we select the keyframe, we can now assign it one of these keyframe types. And this would be an ease in. In other words, moving from point A to point B, you're moving in. Well, actually, it's ease out. So we will select that. And we could alternately also select this one down here and do the move in on that. That in itself isn't going to match it. And that's when you use these handles to just sort of adjust the speed. And if you're lucky, then you get a fairly close movement. So anyway, this is how you do that. Again, most people will get confused with this. So we're just going to use linear here and linear here. And we're going to get out of this. We're not going to assign this. We're going to use additional keyframes. But to close up the graph editor, we can either click on this again, or we can just right click on it and we can hide keyframe animation. Okay, going back to this method, which is not as good, but it will work and it's easier for people to comprehend, is that we can see right away here that our shape is not keeping up. So at this point, we can move the X shape over to here, and that will create a keyframe right there. And then we can add another one here as we get closer. And all we do is we move the playhead to a location that's near, and then we can get it again. This is not going to be perfect, but it's not that important. The key thing here is you want it to appear fast, because you want to be able to grow the screen within it, and it becomes even more important once we start working on the screen, the animation speed. But basically it kind of matches. So now we will match shape number 2 using just simply keyframes, and this is number 1, and here comes number 2, and we want the shape to be over the underlying shape, like so. And then we can add one additional one here. This latter part is not nearly as important, but here we are now starting for the first shape, and I think we can add something right here to this effect, and a little bit more, and yeah, you know, it's really inconsequential at this point. But anyway, let's play that back from the beginning, and we can see it matches fairly closely. So that completes the keyframing of it. For the last thing that we want to do with the phone shapes is to add a blur effect. So we will click on effects, and in trending you will find blur to clear, and basically it takes like 3 seconds to clear up. And so we will add that to each one of our phone shapes here. So we just drag it down and drop it right on the shape. Again, this is something we cannot do with the rectangle itself. It can only be done on a compound clip. That actually finishes our work with those basic shape for now. So let's select all 3 of them and create a compound clip, and we'll just call it phones. One thing we forgot to do was to restore the fill value to 100% for our 3 shapes. So now we need to do a deep dive, so to speak. But we can go over here to the main timeline, and we can go into phone number 1 and click on rectangle, and let's see if this actually works. Most of the times it doesn't. Rectangle here, and change the value to 100%. Then we can just go to number 2 and click the reset button, and likewise we will go to number 3 and we will click the reset button. So now they are all the basic 100% fill. We go back to the main menu, and we can see that we have our fill the way we should. Okay, so there is one difference between the blur effect of the template, and that is that as they get closer to the destination, it clears up. Now, the blur effect that we gave did have a 3-second delay, but our the amount of time used to actually put these into position is less than 3 seconds. So if we examine ours, the ones we've just created, we will see that they actually all 3 move into position, and the blur effect actually clears up as we get closer to the 3-second mark. And we actually want it to be, because it's a motion blur, we want the blur to fade, or in other words, the motion blur to disappear by the time it reaches its final position for each one of them. So what we need to do is we need to go in and actually keyframe that. And one way you can do that is, okay, we named our compound clip phones, and so we will just select phones right here. And we already have our keyframes from our sliding across. And one thing, once you apply, as we did earlier, the blur effect, then in addition to our standard options up here, we also have effects. We can actually click on effects. Now, we want the blur effect to be 100%. And we know that the duration is 3 seconds for this. We could either change the duration to the specific time that it takes for each one of these to reach their final destination, or we could keyframe the percentage of blur. And in our case, since it's not a linear motion, or it's not a linear thing between point A and point B, we're better off using the percentage than the time. So the time really doesn't mean anything to us. In fact, we could probably lengthen it. But let's see if we can do all 3 of them at the same time. No, we can only do one at a time. So we'll start with number 3. And we'll go ahead and lengthen this just so it doesn't affect our fading, or the keyframes that we're going to do. So we're going to select the very first keyframe, and we're just going to match them. And we're going to set it at 100%. We're going to keyframe that. And we might as well do that for all 3 of them. So here, here, and here, we will select that, and we will set a keyframe for this. Okay, so now the keyframe is set for all 3 of them, and this is where we want it to be 0, but we really want the motion blur to end right here at the end as it comes into place. So let's set another 100% one, you know, like right about where the thing is coming into place, and we will keyframe that at 100%, and then let's go to the very end and decrease it to 0. So now our transformation will occur right here as the motion slows down. And we will do the same thing with this one. This is number 2, and we will move back just a little bit right about here, and we will leave that at 100%, and then we will go to the final and we will change it to 0%. Now let's choose the very last one, and we will look at this one now to see where it gets in place. It's pretty close right about here. The motion is slowing down, so we will leave this at 100%. Then we will choose the very last one, and we will then reduce the blur to 0. So now as we scrub across, we have our blurry effect, our motion blur, and then as we get close, now number 3 is clearing up, and then number 2 is clearing up, and finally number 3 is clearing up. Okay, with our current setup, we can now see that unfortunately the shapes are blocking our animation down below. So we will turn on the magnetic timeline, and then we will drag our phones down below. But so that we can see them, we will go ahead and just change the opacity on this here a little bit, and that will give us a chance to verify that we're matching with our shapes below. We're going to be having a lot of tracks and so forth, and we're not going to be able to see them all, but we can make it so that we can see more of the tracks. So just simply drag the header down, move your cursor right on the top. Okay, we're now going to work on creating the phone screens where the videos will actually play. I think first thing is, if the magnetic timeline is still turned on, turn that off. And let's make the top triangles visible again by unchecking these. We'll go ahead and leave the template checked. We don't really need to see the background here just yet, but we will in a little bit. If our playhead isn't on 315, let's go ahead and set it up there so everything is lined up for the time being. And let's correct a little mistake I made in the beginning when we made the rectangles with the red borders. I should have left it the infill green. So let's select the first one and activate the fill. Let's turn it to the green and let's set the opacity down to about 36%. That's fine. And let's repeat that for 2 and 3 as well. Okay, we now have the infill, and the reason we're going to need that is because once we get through with creating the viewport, we're going to keyframe the sizing of it so that it appears the same time as the screens on the template that we're copying. We can see that they grow from the center and they get larger and larger. So we need to be able to see that, and that's why we need the green infill for the time being. Again, let's make sure we leave it on 315. We can start by deactivating the template just so we're looking at everything here. And what we want to do is add the mask to each one of these. And we can't add a mask to a basic shape, so we have to convert each of the shapes into a compound clip. So we'll call them screen 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now that we've converted them to compound clips, let's select screen number 1. And most likely you would have been over here in video, basic, and we select mask. And we want to use the rectangular mask. And we could move these around like this. However, you're likely to grab some other feature on there and things are going to get messed up. So you're better off using the transform section. Let's make sure we scroll down so we can see the entire transform section from transform down to invert mask. And then we will adjust this, and they're pretty much the same locations as we were before. So in the X location, if we swipe across here, we can see we're moving the mask across and we're making visible what we need to see. So the value there is actually minus 624. So just go ahead and enter it that way. Now, the other thing is that it's a little bit off center here. And I know from experience that it's a -4 value on the y-axis. Basically, we want the mask to be inside of our red border. And let's set the radius to 11. Change the width value to 32%. The height value to 54. So you should now have just the green field in here, and you can just double check it by activating the invert mask, and you can see that yeah, it's pretty good. We got a little bit of green in here, and that's okay. It's okay that's a little bit smaller. That gives us a white border around the video that we're going to put in there later. Make sure you turn off the invert mask. Let's right click on the timeline on screen 1 and go to Effects and Filter and Copy. Now we will select 2 and we will right click on that and we'll go to Effects and Filters and we will paste. And likewise, we will select 3 and we will Effects and Filters and we will paste. Now they turned white because the X position for each of these are still over here. And we don't see the values right here from screen 3, but as soon as we click back to screen 2, we can see that it has been added. So we can use our previous values, and we know that this one was a -2.24. And that moved that one over. Now we need to move the third screen over, and we knew that was a positive value of 613. and that puts us right in there. So now we have them basically centered on top of each phone, and that's what we want because the next step will be keyframing them for them to grow. The method we're going to use to grow these screens is going to be by changing or keyframing the mask from nothing to its final position. Again, so let's make sure we're leaving it at 315. And in this case, we can't select all three at the same time because we don't have access to the mask. So we will have to select screen 1. And then at 315, we're going to, in the transform, keyframe that position. And we will just simply click 2, and likewise with 3. Select screen 1 and move the playhead to the left until you notice that it's getting smaller. Now, using the keyboard arrow keys, go ahead and use the either right or left key until you detect the last frame where it gets larger. And I determined that to be at 2.05. And so I'm going to keyframe screen 1 at that position. I still want it to be 100%, or whatever the scale percentage is. It's not 100%. But now moving forward, we can identify location 2, and it will use the same technique. We will just move it until we can see that it's starting to change. We make sure we select screen 2 and using the arrow keys, and that seems to be at 2, even 2. So we will make that 2. Now let's identify the third one, and I think I determined this to be at 120, or 120. So make sure we select screen 3, hit the keyframe. Now we have the basic end positions. Move the playhead to the beginning of the timeline, and let's mark them all at 0, starting with screen 1. We will scale down the size to 0, and then we will select 2, scale it down to 0, and select 3 and scale it down to 0. Now what we want to do is we want to find when the first screen starts to appear, and that's going to be screen 3. So we're going to move that, and what we want to do is we're not looking at the green box at this point in time. We're looking at when the underlying screen starts to appear, the little blue box, and we can see there's just one tiny little spot right there. We go back one more and it's totally gone. So for screen 3, timestamp 20th frame is the spot that we want to start at 0. So we will move it down to 0. We'll get our keyframe right there. Now we move it on to find where the next screen appears, and we can see it is right here, number 2. If we move back 1, it's gone. So we make sure we select 2, and we scale that one down to 0. And now we will select number 1, and we will move the playhead again until we detect, and there it is. And using our arrow keys on the keyboard, we can back up. We see there's one tiny little speck right there, and there it's gone. So this is where this is 0. And so now we have our A position and our B position for each one of them. And let's see how well it matches. And again, it appears, the template that we're copying appears to be expanding faster than what our little green box is. And it's about showing what's in the video in there. So we do need to expand as well. So we can go and, again, we could play around with the Bezier curve, but I think it's just as useful just to add a few extra keyframes here. and we will change the scale to match, and then that just by, oops, there, you didn't want to do that. I selected 1 when I should have been working on 3. So I'm going to use Control Z, that's Control Z. And I'm going to undo that keyframe. I'm going to select 3, which is what I'm working on. And now I'm going to change the scale so that it matches it at this point in time. I can see they're also using some motion blur here, but I don't think we need to do that at this point. Okay, so again, we're going to increase the scale to match, and it's a little bit more. I guess we could do it right here because this is where it starts to slow down. So if we match it up to this point, we should be pretty good. So let's just scrub across this from point A to point B. We come on a little stronger than the underlying image, but it quickly catches up to us. And from there on, it's pretty steady all the way. Now we just select number 2. You can fine-tune this however you like and how close you want to be. You won't actually be running it with the underlying template, so whatever you have for scaling, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that they get large right away and then they slow down, and the purpose is to start revealing the underlying video as quickly as possible. And that just leaves number 1. Now what we will do here is we will combine all of these into one compound clip that we will call screens. So we right click, create compound, screens. The last major step is to add the widgets. So I'll just erase our screens here or disable them for the time being, but we can see there's all these little icons appearing on the screen. They're basically the same on all of them. And what precipitated this whole discussion in this video was the word time up here. That was not, according to Bonnie, a realistic word to have there. It should have some actual time or something or other. There's here all of these widgets. What I did was created some of the widgets. Others I found on the internet. I took screenshots of my phone footer and phone header. Anyway, I have all of these ones I created myself, and you're either going to have to go out and create them yourself, but I'm going to go ahead and create a zip file, compress to zip file, and we're just going to rename that widgets. I don't think I can load up a zip file on the Facebook page in the file section for the group. If not, I can try and load up these individual widgets because they're just images, and I know you can upload images. So you might find them there. These are the widgets I'm going to be working with. Okay, I'm going to start by creating another folder here in the project media, and I'm going to call it widgets. And I'm going to go ahead and import my widgets. So they're ready to be used on this screen, and that will be in the next chapter. Okay, let's turn off the green screens for now. As we scrub across the timeline, we can see that there's 3 groups of animation. The first is the time, the header and the footer with the time and date. That comes on first. The second one, of course, is the icons on the side that fly in either from the side or from the bottom. And then finally, we have our favorite icon popping up. And everything is in place by the time we get to 3:15. So let's make sure we're on 3:15. And we'll start with our header and our footer, and we'll drag them down to the timeline. And they share a lot of both scale and the x coordinates. So we'll do them at the same time. And Of course, you can scale things by just moving these things over here in the scale, and likewise with the X and Y. But I'm going to just, for brevity here, I'm going to give you the exact positions of these. So they both have a scale of 26, and make sure that the lock is on there so that when you move off, they're scaled down. And they're both located at 613 on the X scale. The header, so let's make sure we just have the header selected, and then we'll type in 373. And that puts it right up where we want it. And the footer has a negative value of 358. So we type in minus 358, and that puts it right on the bottom. Next, what we want to do is we want to put in the time. And I have two versions of this. One is the date and time. We'll scale that one down because that has its own set of coordinates. Scale of 12%, and the X position would be 618, and the Y position would be 315. Okay, I'm going to blank that one out because I think it's a little aggressive, and just bring in the other option, which is just the date. And we'll give that one, that also has a scale of 12. And the X position is 626. And the Y position is 355. And that gets us those positioned. And now we can keyframe them in. And what we're going to do is just use opacity. Basically, these four tracks all share the same type of animation, which is basically just fading in. We're just going to select all four of them, and we're going to combine them into a compound clip, which we'll call header footer. Okay, so we have this, and actually we have the not the one that I wanted selected, so let's quickly go in there again. Let's deactivate the... Let's animate this, and we're simply going to use opacity here. I'm going to go ahead and blank it out for the time being because we want to observe when the header and footer start to disappear. We're only using this, so we're just going to keyframe composition, and we're going to find, based on what we see on the screen, looking at number 3 only. I noticed that when this comes on 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, when the third dot appears, that's when it's fully in place. And that's what we want to find now. We want to find that exact keyframe or exact timestamp. And there it is. Now I'm going to switch from the mouse to the keyboard using the arrow key. And I'm just going to go one frame at a time. And there it is. Here it's gone. Here it is. Okay, that is the spot where it's fully in place. So we're going to go ahead and keyframe that for 100%. Now we want to find the other end, which is where it disappears. And the easiest thing to look at is the plus sign down here. And I will just use the keyboard here, and we can watch it shrink, shrink, shrink. It would be helpful if I turned it on. But right here, as we play it, it fades in. Okay. All right, we finished the header for screen 3. Let's copy it and paste it and apply it to screen 2 and 1. So we will do a simple copy. And in this case, I'm just selecting the track above. And I'm going to move the playhead to the beginning. And I'm going to do a paste. And I'm going to move the playhead to the beginning. And I'm going to select the track above. And I'm going to do a paste. So now I have my 3 headers and footers. Of course, they're all located right here on top of screen 3. So what we need to do is we need to change the X coordinates for this. Let's start with screen 2 and change the X position. And I'll go ahead and reactivate the green screens so that as we move number 2 over, we can verify that we're roughly in the middle. We want to make sure that all of our information is in there, and the widest part is that very top line. these are the locations we want for that. Now what we need to do, and I'm going to turn off the screens again, we want to animate start and end of when the time appears on each of these. We'll go ahead and deactivate them for now, because all we're doing is we're trying to find the spot on the timeline where they should be appearing. And what we will do is we will simply drag the keyframes to the appropriate spot. So looking for when this word time disappears, or probably this disappears right down here, we're going to use the keyboard arrow frames, and we can see that right there on frame 117, this keyframe should be located. So we will move it over to 115, 117, thereabouts. Yeah, 117. And let's look for when this one disappears. And we will go ahead and select that, and using our arrow keys again, we will simply look for right there. I'm going to place the cursor here. I'm using the keyboard arrow keys, and I can see right there is where screen number 1 should be completely gone, and that's 122. So I will grab that and drag it over. This is 122, thereabouts, right there. Okay, we now know when they should start appearing. What we need to do is adjust when they should be finally there for number 1 and number 2. We already have it established for number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility on those two again until we identify the exact keyframes at which point these are in place. And remember, this is the one where we look for the third little dot to appear. And we're focusing here now on screen number 2 is on timestamp 207. So we drag this one to 207. And that's right, so there's 207. Now we'll do the same thing for screen number 1. And we're looking for when the third dot appears. And there it was, right there. And that is 212. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that and move it to 210, 11, 12. There we go. If we now turn them back on, we should have the right time lapse for these to appear. And they do. And what we want to do now is just create a compound clip just to isolate them for the rest of our widgets. So we'll select them, we'll create a compound clip, and we'll call it, I don't know, H&F template. Now let's look at this group of icons right here. The top 4 move from the right to the left, and the last icon down here moves from the left to the right and slightly up. But they do share a lot of common attributes. So let's put them all on the timeline, and then we will make the common adjustment first. Let's shrink down the size of them here on the track header until we get the double arrow here. Move the cursor over there and then just pull it down. Okay, at this point we can now see them all. With our playhead on 315, let's select all 5 and set those attributes they all share. They're all 5%. Make sure this is locked so we get 5 on both X and Y. And they all line up at 814 on the X-axis. From this point on, we will now adjust each one of the icons in their Y position. So we will move the heart to 13. I'm just going to give you the numbers. You can manually align them if you like. And the note, we're going to move that one to -88. But we're also going to rotate it to an angle of 52 degrees. And then we'll take the star and we will set that Y value at -168. And then comes the message bubble, and that has a negative value of 259. And I think we want to also flip that. So the little tail right here, use the flip button. So the little tail is in the same direction. And then finally we have the plane. And the plane has a negative value of 402. And it has a rotation of 10. So just a slight adjustment right here. So since this is their final resting place, let's select them all again. And let's put a keyframe right there. So now they're all keyframed to be in this location at the end. Next, let's select the first 4. In other words, let's not select the plane. Let's move to where they're just off the screen, which I've already determined is 119. So this is 115, this is 120. This little hash mark right here is 119. And that's just before they come on the screen. And that value should be 903. And that's just off the mark there. And what we can do is we can turn on our screens down here and just verify that they're just outside. Now we didn't do the plane yet, so we'll do that next and move it out, but it moves over and down. So there's 2 adjustments to that. And we'll just use these values. So it should be at an X position of 618. And the Y should be at a negative 458. And we can see that is just outside. So now we have all the starting positions set. And all we have to do is add a keyframe where each one of them first appears on the screen. We're not going to try to fine-tune it by making sure it follows the underlying icons. These will never be playing together. These have no significance other than sliding onto the screen. So the speed at which they appear is not that important. Let's start by turning off the screens again. We don't really need to see them. We want to see the underlying marks here. We'll start with the heart. And we can see that it's already moved over just a tiny bit. And if we wanted to adjust that, we could do that simply by sliding it like this. And that would be the starting position. Set the start position for each of the others. So we use rather than sliding the mouse across here, we will use the keyboard arrow keys. We will look for, and there is the note. So this will be the starting position for the note. And we do that just by sliding it over a little bit. You don't have to be exact here. And now we select the star is our next one. And so we use our arrow keys until we see the star appearing on the screen. There it is. And we slide that over. And now we select the message bubble. And we slide that over. And finally, let's go back to our start position here for all of them. Clicking this icon on this keyframe on the airplane. And then let's use our right arrow key again until it appears on the screen. And there it is. We can just barely see it. I'll give it one more. And we'll make that our start position for this. So that one we have to move over and up. Now it's going to move diagonally because the final position is the same. And what we want to know now is the ending position of each of these. Where are they finally in place? 315 is like when everything's in place, but the others come into place sooner. And I'm just going to give you the values so that we can plug them in. And for the heart, the end position is 205. So we go here to 205. Make sure you select the heart. And of course, it should be 814 because that's what we ended with. 814 is what we want at that value. Next, let's select the music note. And the final position for that one is 210. So we select 210. Make sure we have the note. And we enter 814 right at that location. And next comes the star. And the star ends at 212. So that's 2 hash marks over. Make sure we have that star, and then we enter 814 there. The message bubble ends at 215, which is this hash mark right there. And we go ahead and add our 814 to that. And then finally, here's the plane. Let's select the plane, and let's move that to 219. So that's 1 hash mark short of 220, 219. And let's give that a value of 814 on the horizontal and on the vertical. And that becomes a negative 402. Now we have them all in position. And we can quickly recap. And although they don't move at the same speed, as I said, this is not as important as it was before. You could tinker with this with extra keyframes, or if you like to play with the Bezier curve, then you can adjust the speed of each of these there. But it's not that important because you're not going to be playing these side by side. Okay, we can see one thing that's missing here, and that is if we move back to the start position where they're all going to move in, and let's just temporarily put on the screen again. We need something that will hide these icons until they become displayed. And we're going to do that with a mask. But we don't want to put a mask on each one of them. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to combine them into one category called widgets, and then we'll add the mask to that. So the first step here is to just select all 5 of them, right-click, create compound clip, and name them widgets. Let's go to whatever the beginning was over here. I think it was like 19. And what we want to do is we want to add a mask to this one screen here. So we're going to select our compound clip, and we're going to go to mask, and we're going to select the rectangle. And we're going to move the rectangle over. And I believe in this case, we're going to use the transform positions of the mask. And I believe that was X value was 613. Should center us on this. And we can then squeeze it in like this, just so that the icons are not visible. And likewise, we will stretch it until we can see the airplane, and then we'll go just beyond the airplane. We want to stay in the green there. That's what our mask is, or just at the edge of the green. So those are the values that we want for our mask. And that's, I think we'll give it a keyframe here, because when we copy it over, we're going to be changing where they will be located. We've completed the one for screen 3. All we got to do is copy it and then paste it twice. So we will just select it, and then we will paste. Now we have a bunch of open lines here. We can get rid of them by activating the magnetic timeline, and that will whisk them away. And we might as well go to the beginning here and paste, and go back to the beginning and paste again. All right, that gave us 3 copies of it. Of course, they're all located right on top of screen number 3. So selecting the one for number 2, we will now move that over using the X position here. And here we go. We can just move it right over on top of there. And likewise, we will take the one for screen 1 and we will scoot that over. So now we have one over that. All that remains now is for us to keyframe these so that they all move in at the appropriate time. What we see here is they're moving in at the same time, which they shouldn't be. For example, number 2 doesn't really start. Let's turn these off. And in this case, we're not trying to get an exact match. So what we will do is we'll just make sure that our playhead is on 2. And then we will select the keyframe and we will move it to 2. Like so. And like I said, it doesn't matter that it doesn't match exactly. In this case, I should turn it back on. It seems to go fairly close. And now only screen 1 remains. And so we just need to figure out when it starts to appear on the screen, and we will move the keyframe for number 1 over. And we see that it's right here on frame 2.05. So we will take our keyframe that we previously placed and put it at 2.05. And I think at this point now we will have them fairly close. And as I said, they don't need to be exact because this is not going to be playing on top of the same keyframe. We just want that action there. It would have been helped if I had activated the top widget there. And there we go. Just one last icon to put down, and that's our favorite icon. I call it speech bubble. That was kind of a stupid term. But let's make sure our playhead is on 315, and we will drag it down, and we will give it the final coordinates. For our scaling, we'll call it 15. For our X position, we'll call it minus 266. And for the Y, we'll call that 309. And that puts us roughly right on top of it. And let's go ahead and just shrink this down there. So let's add a keyframe there, both for this and, just for this. And then let us find the starting position. And what we would do is we would hide this, and then we would go over here until we can see this is gone. And what I figured out was it actually ends right on the 3 mark. And that's where we want to start. So the values we want to insert here would be a scale of 0, and then X value at minus 223, and a Y value of 261. That should give us another keyframe right here where it appears. And we can see that it appears slightly slower than the other one, but that's okay. Again, we're not going to be running these simultaneously. So that gives us our final widget. Okay, just one little housekeeping item that we want to take care of here, and that has to do with the screen. We had left them with a green infill. We need to remove that, and then we want to make a little placeholder for the video to go in there. So this is how we're going to go about it. We could go in here to screens, or we could click here on the timeline and just pick screen number 1. And what we want to do is we want to move this up 1, and then we want to click remove fill. The next thing we want to do is we want to put in a title, and we'll put it in down below. This is going to be our placeholder where we're going to insert our video eventually. But we're going to give us a little custom message here. So we'll double click on that, and then we'll go over here to text, and down in here in advanced, let's click on advanced, and then this should be selected. Just hit the delete button. and then insert a shape. And take this shape right here, rectangular shape, and let's type here, insert video 1. And let's change that color to black so that's more readable. And we will go ahead and apply that. And now using the transform section here, we'll change the X position so that it's over here kind of in the middle. And we're going to want to do this to the other two as well. So let's just go ahead and right click and copy this little message, and we just have to change these two. So from here we'll jump into screen 2 and we will move it up 1. We will take the fill away. We will go ahead and paste our little message, and we will change it to, okay, let's get over here again into text, scroll all the way to the top, and then change the 1s to 2s. And then let's go ahead and scroll down again and change the X position so that it's in the center there. Positioning is not that critical because it's not occupying the entire screen. So we'll finish up with screen 3. And that's perfect. Now later on I'll show you how to insert the videos and how to use it, but we will actually be using this little placeholder right here. All the elements we need in order to make this a reusable template are in place. We no longer need to see the template that we copied, but we should be looking at our screens, we should be looking at our phone, we should be looking at our template there. Okay, so everything is in place, but it's not efficient to have these compound clips and everything right here. For one thing, they're going to take out a lot of memory. And the other thing that's going to happen every time we reuse it, these images are going to get loaded into the project, which is not really desirable. So we can condense this, make it take less resources from our computer, and eliminate the need for these pictures to get imported. And that is, we're going to export this with a green screen background. So we want to select everything from the speech bubble down to the header and footers, and we want to move them up 1 track. And on this empty track here, what we want to do is we want to insert a green screen. And if you go to library, trending, solid colors, scroll down till you see the green screen, drag it down and put it in place. Now we have this. Now, it doesn't really matter with all this other stuff down below because it's not going to make any impact when we do the export. Only the visible objects are going to get exported. So we're going to export this into its own little video. And we will call it icon overlay. And you could improve the export quality so that you're importing something that's kind of nice, but it's not that critical. As long as it matches your whatever settings you normally use, that's fine too. All right, we've overlaid our green screen. And what we want to do now is we want to go back to our media tab and we want to import that green screen. So we just go import media files, and we got our icon overlay. We will open that. We will scroll to the bottom, and then we will insert that on the top row right here. And now we have our green screen. But what we need to do is, of course, we need to make the green screen transparent, and we already know how to do that. We would be over here in AI Basic, and then we would click on AI Tools, and we would activate the chroma key. But before we do that, let's just deactivate all of these other icons that we've got right here because they're no longer used, including the green screen here. And now all we're looking at is our own screens, phones, and our background. Okay, let's activate the chroma key. We can take one more step to improve the efficiency of this template. And just like we condensed the top layer, the icons, we can also condense the two bottom layers, the phones, which actually constitutes 3 tracks in this compound clip, and our color. So what we will do is we'll export them. So we need to turn off anything else that may be visible, so that we're just exporting these bottom 2 tracks here, and we'll call that base layer. And that's very quick, and we will go ahead and just import that. But what we're going to do is we're going to select everything else, since this is our base layer, and we're going to move it everything up 1 track. And let's make sure we turn off that, and also this at the top. And let's import the base layer. And let's just drag our base layer down here on the bottom. The next step will be to peel out all of the things we don't need for the project, but so that we can come in and work on the project again in case there's something that didn't work out right or whatever. Let's save this. First of all, just do a regular save, and then after that, go in and do a file, save project as, and give it a new name. And you could call it my final. And what we need to remove at this point, and I might as well move this up a little bit so we can see what it is that we need. The only things we need are the screens, the base layer, and the icon overlay. That's all we need. So we could simply go and delete these. However, that in itself is not going to get rid of them in the project. And that's why we saved it under a different name. We're going to delete them here, but we also actually need to go in and delete it from the timeline. We no longer need to use phones. Okay, I got to remember not to double click on these things, but we can screens we use, widgets we're no longer using, and the reason they show that they're on the project is they exist here in the compound layers, and there is unfortunately no efficient way of just clicking on them here, so you have to know what you want to keep and what you want to delete. And the only thing we need is screen 1, 2, 3 screens. All of these other compound clips can be deleted. And we have to do that in our media folder. And so we could go in here and look for them and just simply delete them. And screens, we do want to keep screens 1, 2, and 3. So those we do. Phones we can get rid of. Let's just maybe just do it this way here. Just hold down the control key and select all of these. Icon overlay, that's a new thing we just made. Template, header and footer, we don't need those. We do need base layer, we have just created that. All widgets, if you had that one, you might not have had some of these, but so we will delete all of those. Now we have only these things on the timeline. Combine them into one compound clip, and then we're going to call it split screen phones. So now we have just one thing, and with nothing else on the timeline other than this, we can now create a custom template which can be used in many projects in the future. So we would go to templates, and we would go to Mine, and we would go to Custom, and then we would just click this, and that would give us this one called My Final. Okay, we'll call it 3-phone split screen. I'm going to do a project save on this. Then I'm going to go in and do a new project. All right, so this is how you use the custom template we just made. You click on Templates, you click on Mine, you click on Custom, and you just drag down your 3-screen template. There are 2 ways to get in to insert the videos into their placeholders. One is to just double click on this and then double click on the screen below until you can see screen 1, 2, and 3. The other is to click over here on the timeline and simply select screen 1. Now, before you start placing stuff on the timeline, what we want to do is we want to drag down a video and we want to plop it right on top of this little marker that we made. And it's best to just turn off the magnetic timeline to do that. Then go and grab your media that you want to drop in there and just drop it in. Now you can choose to trim it off or whatever, or you could just say, well, I want to use this section right here, for example. So you could trim that and delete it and put it in there. If you now wanted to focus on something else, here's the easy way to do that. Just use your X and Y to move things up and down. And likewise, you could scale in or scale out or whatever it is that you want to do. But whatever is shown inside the template border here, that's what's going to appear on screen 1. And so you can easily move then to screen 2. Just click over here again and take your image that you're going to put in here and drop it right on there. Now we'll probably use the audio from screen 1, so we will go ahead and silence that from this one. And then number 3, let's get our 3rd video, and we can plop that right in here too. And we might want to move up a little bit. Yeah, here's a pretty good section. Let's start right here. Let's delete that and move it over. And let's see what part of the video we're showing. Not very interesting there. Let's go ahead and move it over so we're showing exactly what we want to show. And that's it. That's basically all you have to do in order to use it. And you click this to go back to the main timeline. And this is a 5-second clip. We will go ahead and restart our little template. Basically, this is how you can copy a pre-made template with your own little flair built into it and have the same resource, which you will never lose. It won't be taken away from you. And anyway, that's about it.